Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing an episode of our Jurassic World Evolution kind of like pack review. So we're going to have a look at the new pack. This is the Cretaceous Predator Pack. So this has a bunch of animals or predators, basically theropods from the Cretaceous, you could say, which I'm actually quite excited to get stuck into because there's a couple cool feathered ones. And we've got a returning one from Camp Cretaceous that I know everyone's going to be excited for. So let's get stuck into our first animal today. So we're going to be starting off with a really cool animal from, like, that's been in the game before, or kind of been in the franchise. We got Concavenator.
The Concavenator is quite literally a hunter with a hump. So please, please, please keep it sweet, because I really don't want to have to flee from this Spanish predator.
These are really cool one. This is Concavenator. So, I'll fix that again. Look at that. This is a real pretty angle, actually. I like this angle. Maybe have a look at this one over here. Okay, so Concavenator. So, Concavenator is a really interesting animal. It's an extinct Carcharodontosaurid, so it's like an early relative of things like Carcharodontosaurus, etc., etc. They're a theropod dinosaur from the early Cretaceous. They come from about 130 million years ago, for the Barbian age of the early Cretaceous. I mean, its full name is Concavenator convertaris, which means the curved hunter with a hump, which is referred to where it was found. So in of itself, it's kind of this. It was discovered in La Jolla's fossil site in Spain by paleontologists Jose Luis Sanz, Francesco Ortega, and Fernando Escanzo. Forgive me for my Spanish. And from the Autonomous University of Madrid and the National University of Distance Education. So yeah, really cool. And quite well preserved, which is interesting. So, unlike a lot of those bigger Carcharodontosaurs like Carcharodontosaurus, Gigantoraptor, Mapusaurus, Megaraxes, all them, these guys are a bit smaller, about medium size, you could say. They get about 5 to 6 meters, or about 16 to 20 feet long, and about 320 to 400 kilograms, or about 710 to 880 pounds, which is really cool. And there's a couple of unique features to it, which is the most obvious one you kind of see here is the big spine on its back. So it has kind of just before the hips, it's got this really tall spine, and then kind of a dip, and then another little hump on the tail. So pretty much like all the sacral vertebrae or are small. I could say this one's probably a little bit off in that regard, but it's still cool. And we don't know really what the function of this crest in particular is. Some have suggested that it's like very similar to like visual displays, so very much like the pretty much the frill of a triceratops, or some of the interesting feathers that birds have, antlers on antelope. That could be very much something that's on deer. Antelope have horns, deer have antlers. Very much more things for sexual selection, maybe not for fighting, but things that are sexually selected, as for displays and things like that. But there's also been talk about using as a visual kind of, or a thermal regulator, so something that they could use to control their body temperature a bit easier. But yeah, really cool. So in terms of its integument, what's another really interesting about this guy is, and it's sparked a little bit of debate, is that it has the evidence of quill knobs. So on the ulna, which is one of the arm bones, very similar to animals like Velociraptor and most birds, so like moorhens is a great example. They have a bunch of quill knobs on their ulna, which is something that's really only found in other feathered theropods and birds, like Velociraptor. And these are where ligaments will attach to hair follicles, which is really interesting. So, and since scales do not form follicles, they ruled out the possibility that it could be long display like scales. So it's likely some sort of feathering. Probably, I like this interpretation. It probably didn't have full-on wing feathers, but a lot of people are going with the quill interpretation, which is really interesting. And we do have quills known from things like Dilong, which is a Coelurosaur, and Tianulong and Psittacosaurus, which also have those quills, which seem to be similar to bird feathers, or potentially like homologous to it, or kind of evolved to be similar, which is quite interesting. And there's been a lot of research on this. Feathers and related structures would be present in their ancestors, because the Neoternoidae from the Middle Jurassic would have likely had some sort of feathering, that they've potentially lost it over time, which is quite interesting. But this has been quite controversial, of course, because dinosaurs and feathers have always been controversial. And some have been skeptical. Some suggest they may have just been like where muscles may have inserted, or potentially like scratches from where the animal may have how it's been preserved. Those sort of things. So some people are not sure about quill knobs, but the latest kind of research suggests that these guys preserve a lateral view. She said it may have been something like that. With ligaments, things like that. So the letterpress is necessarily not valid evidence the clan order shifted. So it's kind of, we don't really know, but it is possible. And I like that Jurassic World Evolution 2 did go with the interpretation of quills, because I think it makes it much more interesting. But yeah, in terms of classification, it is considered a Carcharodontosauridae, so it's related to like Eocacara and Neovenator, a little bit later than them, and then leads into animals like Tyrannotitan, Mapusaurus, Megaraxes, animals like that. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to let it play for a bit, because we want to show off some of the cool animations, because we like showing some cool animations. Show off one of the social ones, why not? Okay, and it's actually quite cute, the social animation. But yeah, I really love how this interpretation, pretty spot on, I'd say, from what we have of it, is pretty spot on. I'd say maybe the only thing really changes is change up the spine a bit, just to make it a little bit more accurate with the spine. I like the quill knobs. I think it's always fun interpretation to show off the quill knobs. I'm definitely a big fan of that, and really adds to the design. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan, and I like the skins as well. I'm not going to go through all the skins and everything. That's more of a Best in Slot thing, because Best in Slot likes going through all the animations and all the skins. I just like talking about the animals in the history, so it does a little bit different. Go watch Best in Slot's video. I do enjoy Best in Slot's content. Very, very awesome. So let's just wait for you guys to like start actually talking to each other. I was about to do it now. Watch this. That is so much like annoying dog energy, because like it just comes up to him and then roars in his face like, leave me alone. It's like, I didn't do anything. I think that's really, really cute. Really love that animation. Done so wonderfully. And another wonderful animal. How could he not love Concavenator? Definitely very, very nice. And rendered pretty well. Pretty accurate, I'd say. Probably some like anatomy differences that could probably be fixed by a modder. But for the most part, pretty good. And for Jurassic World Evolution 2, probably one of the better ones, or one of the best ones, I'd say. Really, really awesome. And love the colors. I love the colors on that guy. Okay, next up, we got another really, really cool one. We have got everyone's favorite big bad dromaeosaur. We've got the Utahraptor.
Aha! This one takes us back to prehistoric Utah. I definitely wouldn't want to meet this raptor out on a camping trip, would you, huh? Because if it's distant relatives or anything to go by, the Utahraptor will make a meal of anything it can get its claws on.
Yeah, let's have a look at you, and it's doing the bug again. You think they'd fix it, but it has not been fixed. Look at this wonderful guy. So this is Utahraptor. So Utahraptor, which means Utah's predator. These guys are a genus of large dromaeosaur that come from the early Cretaceous of about 135 to 130 million years ago. The Permian Age, very similar to Concavenator, from what is now the United States. So it was first discovered in 1993 by American paleontologist James Kirkland and colleagues, with the type specimen being Utahraptor ostromasi, based on fossils that had been unearthed earlier in the Cedar Mountain Formation in Utah, with many other specimens being found, and we'll get into the Utah block as we go on. So yeah, first discovered, the first specimen was found in 1975 by Jim Jensen near the town of Moab in Utah, and then in October of 1991, James Kirkland uncovered more remains, and then in 1993 it was described by Kirkland, Guston, and Berg, and 1993, June of 1993, right around when Jurassic Park was about to come out, which is kind of interesting. So the genus name itself refers to Utahraptor, as in pretty much Utah's predator or Utah's thief. And the specific name Ostromasi is in honor of John Ostrom, who actually was one of the very first paleontologists that got the connection. Well, not the first, but one of the paleontologists that investigated the relationships between dinosaurs like dromaeosaurs and birds, and was really one of the more instrumental figures in the dinosaur renaissance, like moving dinosaurs from being those big, ugly predators that were slow and and made them a lot more warm-blooded, feathered, and kind of started that train, which was really, really cool. Though I will say that pretty much at the beginning of dinosaurs, there were lots of people arguing that they were birds, birds related to dinosaurs, but it kind of fizzled out and then kind of resurged again, and now it's considered basically scientific fact, which is really cool. And also Chris Mayers, which actually helps research Utahraptor as well, so it's kind of to honor two people. And from its description, it's stated to be Utah's predator, but the Latin word raptor means predator or robber or plunderer, not predator. And then it was actually originally supposed to be named Sternbergi because of director Steven Spielberg, because of for funding the paleontological research. But agreement cannot be reached on the funding, so we have something else instead. But then in 2000, there was a change to Ourasaurum as well, but there's kind of taxonomy there in that. But getting into the description, so Utahraptor is one of the largest, if not the largest, and definitely one of the heaviest of all the dromaeosaurs, so really, really big, with the largest specimen having a femoral length of about 60 centimeters, or about 24 inches. So upon description, its dimensions were kind of described as being as much as 7 meters long, or about 23 feet long, and somewhat less than 500 kilograms, so basically the same size as a polar bear. But at that time, although feathers not be found in association with Utahraptor, there had been some strong evidence that pretty much all dromaeosaurs had feathers, and Microraptors are much older and primitive, and pretty much it's very likely or pretty much very possible that Utahraptor was covered in feathers like this, and is a trait that's pretty similar across all of dromaeosaurs. And it's likely that feathers evolved more than once, and then people think, oh, it might be a bit too big for feathers, but there are quill knobs from Gigantoraptor that suggest that large dromaeosaurs would have had feathers. And, Gigantoraptor, Chimera, all that, science being science, I guess. And what's really, really interesting is that we learned a lot, because Utahraptor was first described as very much just a really large dromaeosaur, like giant Deinonychus. But as we get into, we'll talk about some of the later remains that we'll talk about, and it's actually really changed the modern interpretation of Utahraptor, and it's really changed a lot. So this is really interesting. So we'll keep talking. So Utahraptor is a member of the Dromaeosauridae, which is the group of theropod dinosaurs known as the raptors. It includes things like Velociraptor, Deinonychus, and Dromaeosaurus, those kind of famous animals, and is found to be closely related to animals such as Dakotaraptor, Achillobeta, and things like that. So that's kind of what they're related to, a clade of bigger animals in the Dromaeosauri. And in terms of paleobiology, these guys, being much larger than other species of raptors, they were most likely much slower, but actually going after larger prey, so they would be able to take on much bigger animals. There's been like videos of them, or not videos, but like potentially ankylosaurs, larger iguanodontians, small sauropods, things like that. And they would have used their big toe claws there. You can see the big toe claw that most raptors have, held off the floor. They would have very likely used it to handle prey and potentially even kick prey as well. They would have, because they're quite large and big and powerful, they probably could have delivered quite powerful kicks to kind of bring down prey, but they would have likely also used those claws to kind of pin them down, or potentially on their neck as well. So they would have been able to use it to balance, potentially to kill prey. So they did have a lot to do with the killing of their prey, which is really interesting. And in terms of social behavior, in 2001, Kirtland et al. Actually pursued a graduate student's discovery of a 9-ton block of sandstone in Utah. And actually this stone, this fossil block, is called the Utahraptor block, and is found to have at least seven individuals, ranging from adults to babies, or 4 meter long juvenile, a hatchling about 1 meter, about 3 feet long, which is so amazing, and it's around a possible iguanodont. So that has kind of fueled the fires of potentially this as being social group. And it was speculated that this pack may have kind of scavenged on this animal and got stuck in quicksand. Very similar to like the Cleveland loin quarry or the La Brea tar pits. This could have been a predator trap. These animals could have been unrelated. It just happened to be age range of Utahraptor that kind of got stuck. Though it's very likely, I'd say more likely, just because of coincidence. If it was more of a normal predator trap, typically there's a lot more variety of predators, so there would have been a lot more animals than just Utahraptor in that site. So it's very likely they would have been either living or potentially even hunting in groups. Because when we say social, it doesn't necessarily mean they were hunting in groups. They could just be social and as in like a family group, or they don't really hunt together, things like that. But they very likely could have hunted together. But we really can't tell from just dead animals. It's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, really, really cool. This block has taught us so much about what Utahraptor would have looked like. From what we know from the adults especially, they would have been a lot bulkier and a lot bigger than, or in terms of like body size, than a lot of other dromaeosaurs. You can see they've got a much larger head with almost like this crooked jaw coming out, and then you've got much bigger, bulkier legs and arms, and shorter tail, much more larger and heavily built in comparison to a lot of other dromaeosaurs. And there has been like some evidence or theorized that like animals like Deinonychus may not have had like social behavior like wolves and things like that, based on like dietary preferences between adults and juveniles. But it's very likely that Utahraptor could, but Deinonychus, or not Deinonychus didn't. Animals are so complex. Like you have, look in Panthera, you have lions and tigers. One's social, one's not, and you can't really tell we're looking at the brain or anything. So it's very likely that even within that there could have been some variety. But it is unknown whether they could have had this social behavior going on and things like that. But still really, really cool to theorize about. I like to think that these guys were potentially a little bit social. Maybe not at the point of like living in complex family groups like wolves or lions, but some sort of social behavior would be cool. Because I think a lot of people overthink, oh, they're just big predators, but being birds, or related to birds, and being like large animals, they probably were quite intelligent. Social animals are much more complex than we'd like to give them credit for. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to talk about a little bit what they're living with. So Utahraptor is from the lower part of the Cedar Mountain Formation, which is part of the yellow cat member, and was very important in the ecosystem as it was a large predator. So they would have been found in the Arctic region during the Cretaceous and eat prey as big as itself. So hunting individuals of at least 3.5 meters could like kill of animals up to tons. And there were large animals like sauropods believed to be quite an important part of their diet. And as I mentioned, they come from about 130 to 135 million years ago, which means the yellow cat has been dated to about the Bambrian-Aptian stage, which is pretty clear. And there's lots of interesting animals it would have lived with. So these guys would have lived in areas that was like a semi-arid area with floodplain, prairies, riverine forests, and woodlands, predominated by conifers and ferns. And there was also little bogs and things like that as well. Dinosaurs they would have lived with includes like iguanodontians such as Hippodraco and Pseudocarus as well. And smaller theropods such as Neocladia and Martharaptor. And other animals include the Noasaurid Gastonia and sauropods Cedosaurus and Moabosaurus. These guys would have been obviously prey for these guys. Very interesting in terms of what's living in there. Some other animals we'll think as well. Iguana colossus is another animal it would have lived with. What's another big sauropod? Cedosaurus is a big one. Falcarius is another big one. And then you obviously have Utahraptor in that ecosystem as well. And it was also quite rich in terms of other faunas. So there's like paleofauna, as I mentioned. There's also fishes like Ceratodus and Ceromus, and also turtles and Rhynchocephalian, so ancient relative of the Tuatara, Toxophosaurus, and lots of different sharks as well. Also crocodilians, and potentially another large sailback iguanodontian. Some other really cool animals that haven't been described yet. But yeah, this is really actually important animal history as well. Robert T. Barker made a book called Raptor Red, which was published in 1995, which is like the story of a female Utahraptor, and was actually quite positively received by a lot of people as well. But of course, being nearly 30 years old now, it's outdated, but still cool. Really got people into dinosaurs. And also is now considered 2021 the state dinosaur of Utah, I believe. And it was initially, but it was the Allosaurus, and I believe they kind of created a proposal for the Utahraptor State Park where that block was discovered to kind of have a national park around that Utahraptor block. So that's really, really interesting. So this is an interesting dinosaur that's had an interesting place in history. So yeah, really, really awesome. So we're gonna see and follow one of these guys and see if they'll do their social animation. Let's see if you could do it. And I actually really love the skin. Like the anatomy's pretty accurate. It's got the big bad head. I think the feathers on the arm are still a little bit off though. They should be connecting through the middle finger there. On birds, basically they have the coverts that come from the middle finger there that go all the way down that finger, and that's where kind of the primary feathers will come up from there. And the little alula there, that's what this guy's missing. But still, other than the wings, I'd say it's pretty accurate. Big, bulky dromaeosaur body, nice long tail, and that big, bulky head that really makes it characteristically Utahraptor. So yeah, pretty awesome. And I love the skins. I actually seen the one without the pattern, and I like the patternless one more. It's just got much of a nice gradient to it. So yeah, we're going to let these guys do their social animation, hopefully. And I love the little crown of feathers there. It really reminds me of like a harpy eagle. So yeah, really, really cool. Let's just wait for you to do your social. Well, you need a friend. Don't you need a friend? We all need a friend. Go away. Really, really pretty. Definitely a big fan. Honestly, I like it just without the pattern. It's nice to see a nice gradient. It really did a wonderful job. I really do love how this Utahraptor's come out. Such an awesome animal. Let's see if he's going to go up to the social animation with him. Yeah. Oh, that's cute. Rolls. Uh-oh. Nah, I like that. That's so cute. Utahraptor really done wonderfully here. Definitely a big fan. Really, really awesome. Other than the wings, I think it's pretty much spot on. And I love seeing more feathered dinosaurs. I love seeing more feathered dinosaurs in Jurassic World. Really done a wonderful job. Definitely, I'd say this is one of the highlights of the pack. Really has done awesome. So, next up, we have got another big feathered guy. We're going to have a look at Gigantoraptor. So, really, really awesome one as well. It's cool and nice to have a dinosaur that really goes with the bird feel a lot, because these guys walk so much like birds. We really love it. Okay, so Gigantoraptor, which means giant thief. These are a genus of large oviraptorosaur that lived in Asia during the late Cretaceous and is from the Dasab Formation in Inner Mongolia, where its remains were first found in 2005. Okay, so it was found, as I mentioned, in 2005, along with the sauropod Sardinosaurus, which has been uncovered in 2001. And everyone was like, whoa, this was bone's not actually from a sauropod, it's from a theropod that was thought to be about the same size as Albertosaurus. And then in 2007, it was described as Gigantoraptor electorus by Tan Qinhui, Wang Zhedong, Zhangzhen, and Tai Tanlun. The species name, or the generic name, Gigantoraptor, means like basically giant Caesar or giant robber. And the scientific name, Erlenensis, refers to the Elan Basin where the holotype was found. And the holotype was found as a single adult individual, which has a nearly complete mandible, some partial cervical vertebrae, dorsal vertebrae, things like that, scapula, radius ulna, complete manus, ilium, things like that, and a fairly complete pes, which is quite cool. And then in 2015, there was another one found with a dentary that was pretty much identical. So now we have a little bit more of this guy, which is really, really cool. Let me just cough there. In terms of its description, as I mentioned, it is humongous. It literally lives up to the name Gigantoraptor. So it's actually the largest known Oviraptorosaur, which is known from skeletal material. It's approximately 3 times larger and 35 times heavier, or 3 times as long and 35 times heavier than City Party, which is the next largest. And the holotype by Gigantoraptor is believed to be about 8 meters, or about 26 feet long, and have a height of about 3.5 meters, or about 11 feet at the hips, and weighed about 1.4 or 1.55 tons. And then some estimates have put it up to more than like 12 tons, which is pretty interesting. So, Oviraptorosaurs are also fairly known to have developed feathers, as they have Cardiopteryx and Pygostyles as well. And very common thing in Oviraptorids, so it's very likely that these guys had feathers, though there is an argument maybe they could have been less feathered because of their large size. That's something I've gone on about, like the 3-ton rule I've gone on about with Titanosaurs, things like Therizinosaurus, Gigantoraptor, and Tyrannosaurs. So yeah, really, really cool. In terms of its skull, we know that the lower jaws were about 46 centimeters long and were toothless, very similar to other Oviraptorosaurs. Very likely they had a horny beak, or a rhamphotheca, which is the technical term for it, and it seems to be very similar to most Concavenatorids, like things like Anzu, which is really, really interesting. And the postcranial skeleton, they have that large humerus, things like that. Pretty cool. The metatarsus is about 58 centimeters, and they have large and strongly curved pedal angles, which is quite cool. So, in terms of its description, 2007, it was considered quite a basal Oviraptorid, but then in 2010, with a second analysis, they kind of found that it was a Gigantoraptor, which is kind of a group of Gigantoraptors. And they thought it was a basal kind of Gigantoraptor. That includes animals like Anzu, things like that, and they thought to be quite basal to that group. And in terms of feathers, as I mentioned, their relatives have feathers. Pretty much all Oviraptors had feathers, though there has been some argument that say these larger animals, since Gigantoraptor is quite big, they are 300 times heavier than the next for the species like Cardiopteryx. They may have had less feathers due to thermoregulation. However, they would have potentially at least had arm feathers, which they would have potentially used them by brooding and things like that. But I would say this is probably the most likely interpretation, this one here. They didn't get over that 3 tons that they're talking about, and plus feathers can be used to help cool you down a bit. So, yeah, they may have been a little bit more naked, or just not as hairy or feathery as other ones, but it's very likely they could have still had all sorts of feathers, which is quite cool. And also, as well, we do have evidence there is of their nests. So these guys really awesomely have a large nest. There's Oviraptorid's eggs that are under the genus Macrolongtulithus, but if you say that, it indicates that these large Oviraptorosaurs may have built large round nests and potentially would have sat on them, and that's why they had their arm feathers, potentially for brooding, which is quite cool. In terms of autogeny, we know that these guys, they looked into the bones and had lines of arrested growth, which is very similar to a lot of other animals. And they would have reached young adulthood at about 7 years of age. And the specimen that was found was actually still relatively young and may have actually grown a bit larger. Maybe not by much, but still larger. And they would have had a growth rate actually much faster than a lot of other non-avian large theropods such as tyrannosaurs. So they would have grown quite quickly, which is quite cool. And another usual thing is that they have elongated hind limbs. So they tend to have quite long femurs and tibias compared to a lot of other theropods, which shows that these guys may have been well adapted for running or moving at for long periods of time. So they're quite well adapted for walking and running long distances. So that's really, really cool. And in terms of feeding, there has been some research on the jaws of these guys, and actually shows a lot of convergence with those of the modern Tuatara, which is quite interesting. So these guys would have likely have been omnivorous or potentially more herbivorous. So these guys, the dentary and things like that show that these guys may have been a non-selective feeder, so they very likely would have been more herbivorous. And these guys would have been kind of very similar to things like Euoplocephalus and Hadrosaur, so very large animals, and because being larger, they have greater energy requirements. They would have been much less picky on what they'd be eating. They'd eat a lot more lower quality food, so they're able to just pack more in them. So very likely more herbivorous, but they would have potentially eaten some prey occasionally, considering a lot of Oviraptorids are interpreted as being omnivorous. So they potentially may have had some meat in them. And even the most herbivorous animals like horses will eat meat and chew on bones from time to time, which is quite interesting. But as I mentioned, there is the Megalongoteuthis, which is like large nests that have been preserved. And the only animal big enough really to make them is Gigantoraptor, or an animal very like Gigantoraptor would have made these nests. And there's been research into see how they would have kind of sat in them and stuff like that. So they kind of laid them in a big circle with a big circle in the middle that would have been free for the parent to sit on, and potentially would have covered them with their arms and things like that. So they wouldn't directly sit on the eggs; they'd kind of like sit in the middle and use their arms or potentially other ways to kind of cover their eggs, which is quite interesting. And would have sat on the eggs like that. Or they may have just not sat on the eggs at all, but they would have likely sat on that and would have allowed some body contact to help keep them warm. So in terms of its paleo environment, Gigantoraptor is known from the Irandashu Formation of Inner Mongolia that dates between 95 million years ago, is around that time, and it was a very rich habitat. It was highly humid with floodplains and a semi-arid climate, and they would have had lots of foliage and plantations, and there was lots of herbivorous dinosaurs that it was living with. And those include animals. Animals it was living with include Electrosaurus, which is Tyrannosaurid, Archaeornithomimus, Elanosaurus, and Nemegtosaurus, Sodorosaurus, Gilmosaurus, and Brachiosaurus were sauropods and hadrosaurs. So very large animals with them. And really, really cool. So really awesome interpretation here. I think the same thing going on here with the wing feathers. The wing feathers aren't quite right. You can see it ends at the wrist when it should be carrying down the arm. That's the only thing really wrong. I could say maybe making it a bit more bulky and things like that from what we know from this guy maybe could have worked. I know there's a couple paleodacs that have probably come for this guy. But one thing I really like from this design is the feather crest. So I really like that they gone with the feathered crest, because a lot of them are interpreted of having head crests like casques, and I think this is kind of another way to make it a little bit more distinct. I like the feathered crest. I think it comes out quite well. Interesting bit of speculation and just makes it more different, which I always love. I love... I like accuracy, but I like when people take that and do something different with it, and this is a great example of that. So we got a really interesting feather crest going on, which I do love. Really am a big fan of that. So yeah, we're going to let them walk off and do their thing. So let's see if they'll do their wonderful social animation, and that's what I want. Let's probably going to do this here. Yeah, we are. And I love how they made it so bird-like. I love that a lot of them are quite bird-like. Really, really cute. I love these guys. Definitely such an awesome one. Definitely a big fan. Okay, so that's Gigantoraptor done. It was one of those animals I first requested as well. I remember my first Jurassic World Evolution video back in the first game. It was like right at the end with the modding. It was like, what else could they add? I put like Gigantoraptor as one of them, like Oviraptor and Gigantoraptor, because they're both pretty similar, but just the difference of size. But yeah, it's nice to see them both in the game finally. Really, really awesome addition. I love big feathered dinosaurs. Definitely an awesome addition. Okay, so next up, we have got, last but certainly not least, and I know you Camp Cretaceous fans are going to love this, we have got Tarbosaurus. So look at these wonderful two guys here. So this is Tarbosaurus, which means alarming lizard. So Tarbosaurus is a genus of Tyrannosaurids, so very closely related to T-Rex, in fact considered sister species. They lived about 70 million years ago during the late Cretaceous period in the Maastrichtian, and comes from a single species, Tarbosaurus bata, which means kind of like alarming lizard king. Bata, I believe, means king in Mongolian, which is quite cool. So it was first described in 1946, or first found, and then 1955 it was described as Tyrannosaurus bata, which Mongolian word bata means hero, the hero. And then there was a couple other species named, but it was originally just considered Tarbosaurus itself, and it was named as its own species. And I personally think a lot of people would probably, there has people that have lumped them into Tyrannosaurus. I think that's a very fair thing to do, but most people just consider them Tarbosaurus, so I'll call them Tarbosaurus. Though I am not against lumping in them Tyrannosaurus, since they are quite similar. But there's been a lot of research in these guys as well. There's another paper that kind of looked at different growth stages and things like that. So quite a well-known animal. And if you guys know about the story with Nicolas Cage, he actually bought a Tarbosaurus and then donated it back to the Mongolian government, which was really, really cool. And we also have some skin impressions, which is always really awesome. They seem to have non-overlapping scales found in the thoracic region or around like the chest there. And there's been footprints as well that show these guys were probably most likely scaly to some extent. And also a throat pouch has been interpreted in 1997. There was a damaged Tarbosaurus skull with a dewlap or throat pouch, which was thought to be almost like a display thing that could inflate or potentially be brightly coloured, very much like a frigate bird or something like that, used to display. And then confirmed the species not being collected because it was on its own slab, and kind of interpreted it as like this throat structure, though it may very much just been a bit of skin or how it decomposed. Still a really cool interpretation though. Though in terms of its size, it was very comparable in size to Tyrannosaurus. A little bit slightly smaller. The largest specimen we have is about 10 meters long, about 33 feet, 3 meters or about 9.8 feet tall, and about 4 to 5 metric tons. With the largest skull is actually 1.3 meters or 4.3 feet, which is larger than any other tyrannosaurid other than Tyrannosaurus itself. So it's pretty much second best. And one thing as well is, in the game, there's a guy that, Luca, he makes like size charts. If you go to the Cobra Discord, where a lot of the botters go, made a size chart, and the Tarbosaurus in game is about 12.2 meters, which is actually the same size as Sue in real life. So this is actually as realistic a T-Rex as you get in terms of size, which is really, really funny in my opinion. But yeah, Tarbosaurus itself, we're not going to talk about this Tarbosaurus. There's a lot of wrong with it because it's like a pure Camp Cretaceous kind of design that's very Jurassic Worldy. You can see it's got a very different shaped skull than the Tyrannosaurus from was very similar skull shape to the Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus, but in real life, these guys would have had skulls that were a lot thinner than actually T-Rex. So these guys would have had a tooth count that had slightly more teeth, fewer teeth than like Gorgosaurus and Utahraptor, but more teeth than Tyrannosaurus. So these guys have much thinner skulls, which would have allowed them to actually hunt bigger animals like sauropods and hadrosaurs a little bit better, since that's mostly what lived in their habitat. Tyrannosaurus is a really interesting example because it lived with so many animals that were armored, like ankylosaurs and ceratopsians, like Ceratopsian and Ankylosaurus. Because they were so armored and that was most of its prey, they developed this like overdeveloped, really strong bite. And Tarbosaurus definitely had a very strong bite that was pretty much probably second best. But these guys were a little bit leaner, probably more adapted, very similar, like maybe in convergence to things like Gigantoraptor or Gigantosaurids, which were much more were much better adapted for things like flesh grazing. So being able to better hunt hadrosaurs and sauropods, which were much larger than them, but were obviously also not quite as armored. So it's very much, they would have been a little bit better adapted for hunting those kind of animals. Though they still would have had a tremendous bite force. Even Gigantoraptor had a bite force of 2 tons, and they weren't like specifically adapted for biting things like T-Rex was. They potentially could have had a bite force that was like in between, maybe even nearly as comparable as T-Rex. So really, really awesome as well. And in terms of its body compared to Tyrannosaurus, it's not too different. Very much maybe just a little bit smaller, a little bit lither, not quite as big and bulky, and things like that. A little bit shorter, like the metacarpals, a little bit shorter. In comparison, yeah, they would have been pretty similar, maybe just a little bit leaner and meaner than T-Rex in comparison. Very similar animals, though. But yeah, Tarbosaurus is a theropod in the subfamily Tyrannosauridae, and is in the family Tyrannosauridae. So they were originally described, as I mentioned, as a species of Tyrannosaurus, but then it was put in its own genus Tarbosaurus, and are generally considered sister taxa. Even if they aren't considered the same genus, they are considered quite closely related to each other. And even the most recent one, 2020, they are considered the most closest relative Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about their paleobiology. We do have a lot of subadult and adult specimens, but we do have some young uh, Tarbosaurus that were about 2 to 3 years old when they die. They're more weakly constructed, and very likely that these guys, very similar to Tyrannosaurus, they would have occupied slightly different niches in their ecosystem as they grow up, so they didn't compete with each other, and also because there's such a size difference. There's evidence suggests that juvenile Tarbosaurus may have been crepuscular or nocturnal hunters, and we don't know if whether adults were, and it's kind of a hard thing to tell, but really interesting way to kind of niche petition or try and avoid each other. Though unlike Tyrannosaurus, they would lived with animals like Utahraptor, which is like a Tyrannosaur that's very much lean and mean. They would have looked very much like a young T-Rex, so potentially would have competed with them in some way, and probably got a bit bulkier, a bit quicker, because it didn't want to take the niche of that guy, pretty much. And there's been some research very similar to Tyrannosaurus. They would have had quite good hearing. They would have been quite good at like listening to things as well. Large olfactory bulbs, so they had quite a high developed sense of smell and a well developed Jacobson's organ, which allows them to detect pheromones. And may have had some sort of complex mating behavior or use scent in some way to kind of communicate, which is really interesting. In terms of its brain, they're much more similar to crocodilians and other non-avian dinosaurs than to birds, which is quite interesting. And their bone volume is actually estimated to be about only 8 cubic centimeters. But yeah, really well adapted, very similar to crocodilians. So crocodilians are stupid intelligent. They've got tool use and all that, so it's very likely Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus are wicked intelligent too. So don't count them out, because people say, oh, they're just big dumb lizards, but crocodiles are super smart. They even have tool use, and they can remember things, and they have excellent memories and really good at learning, so I wouldn't count these guys out. But yeah, the skull of Tarbosaurus is not really that different between North American Tyrannosaurids. Very similar, of course. But that leaner skull, they had less of a rigid mandible. They're a little bit more flexible, which is believed to be adaptation to hunting those larger titanosaurs that lived in the Namek Formation. And they did not really live in the late Cretaceous in North America. So, as I mentioned before, these guys probably been much better adapted for hunting larger prey, things like hadrosaurs and titanosaurs, while Tyrannosaurus is much more adapted for eating like much harder armored prey such as ceratopsians and ankylosaurs. Though they may have hunted Alamosaurus, which is interesting. And there's also differences suggest that seen in Alioramus as well, that they're closest relative to Tarbosaurus, and they might have actually got large because of convergent evolution. So that's another thing as well. They may have actually been closely related to Alioramus. So yeah, it's very interesting. Like another debate. That's why Alioramus could potentially be a relative as well, because of convergent evolution. So that's another interesting as well. And there has been some, as I mentioned, evidence of bite force. So they would have had estimates put of bite force of 8 to 10,000 per square inch. So they could have crushed bone just like T-Rex, and there have been evidence of them biting into animals such as Saurolophus, which is a hadrosaur, and also Dinocyrus, which they lived with. There's evidence of them biting into them, all sorts of bite forces and things like that. And a 2020 study actually looked at the isotopes of these guys to see what they were eating. And these guys would have been eating, which confirms the hypothesis, these guys would have been eating a lot of titanosaurs and hadrosaurs, unlike T-Rex, which are probably eating a lot more ceratopsians and ankylosaurs. But yeah, really, really cool. In terms of its environment, these guys would have been living in the Namek Formation, or the Gobi Desert in southern Mongolia, to the early Maastrichtian around the late Cretaceous, about 70 million years ago. And the Namek Formation would have had large river channels, much more humid, and very similar to the Okavango Delta. It's been compared to a lot. Lots of shallow lakes and things like that. And has been found in mollusks as well. There are all sorts of fish and turtles, lots of crocodilians as well, including para-alligator, which is a really interesting one. And there also would have been birds as well. There's a Judaornis, which is a relative of Hesperornis, and an Elongornithine, Gulanania as well, which is really interesting. And there would have been ankylosaurs such as Sarkia, the Pachycephalosaur Prenocephalae, Barospodia, and Saurolophus, which would have been obviously good, since they're large hadrosaurs, good prey for these guys. And then large sauropods such as the Mectosaurus and Ornis colocoldia, which both would be good prey for these guys as well. Other types of theropods they would have been living with includes Alioramus, troodontids such as Zanzibar, Turcosaurus, Borogavia, Neomectoraptor rhizosphalia, which are oviraptorosaurs, Baragan, which is also considered a basal tyrannosaurid. Other animals include Dinocyrus, Therizinosaurus, Gallimimus, and Ceramimus, which would have been omnivorous, but they would have potentially been prey for younger Tarbosaurus occasionally. And there actually has been some relative, they would have not been conditioned, but similar juvenile subadult Tarbosaurus would not have filled the niche of these large Tarbosaurus. So potentially these guys would have been prey for your smaller, younger juvenile Tarbosaurus. But yeah, really, really, really awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy, of course, as I mentioned. Much thinner skull than T-Rex, which is not seen here, and everything has got these huge, big crests here. From what we know of the skin, as I mentioned, we do have some preserved stuff from Tarbosaurus. None of these big spikes going on. None of that. None of that. None of that. Very small scales. You probably would even notice if you looked at it like this, because the scales would have been only just a few millimeters big. So it would look almost smooth. As I mentioned, very lean skull. They did have the 2 fingers that's characteristic of most tyrannosaurs, and probably a lot leaner body as well. Probably longer tail, and yeah, this is very much your Jurassic Park style, the Jurassic World style. But I actually do quite like the design, and of itself, I know like Wheat doesn't like it very much, and I agree if it's not very accurate at all, but at least they tried to do something a little bit different in Camp Cretaceous, and it's Camp Cretaceous. You can't really hate it too much. It's a kid's show. It's like, what do you expect? To be honest. But I do like that they're really putting in an effort as well to try and add all the Jurassic Park, because really this is a Jurassic Park game, and at the end of the day, I think they should be adding as many Jurassic Park designs as possible. And you know I love my accurate stuff. Hell, I wouldn't be making an accurate dinosaur mod series if I didn't like my accurate stuff, but I do like that they're trying to complete that Jurassic World kind of aesthetic, trying to get the Jurassic Park universe. That's what I think should be the goal of the game, get as much Jurassic Park content in as possible, so this can be like the definitive Jurassic Park game, in my opinion. But I still think it's cool. I like the design as in of itself. I really wish it was a little bit more realistic, of course. I do always wish that. But in itself, it's not too bad. I really like this one. This is the 2022 skin, I'll have you say it. This is the one that's seen in the Hidden Adventure. And I do quite like it. I think it's a really interesting color. And I really like how they've changed it. Frontiers really changed it a bit to better fit the game. A little bit more realistic. And I'm definitely a big fan of it. So yeah. I do like it. I just wish it was more accurate. And of course, there is Wheat's Tarbosaurus mod, which I love. It's such an amazing mod. He's got pretty much covered the prehistoric planet one, and also put feathers on it, which I love. Probably one of the best mods for this game, if not the best mods. And that's been updated, so you can always download that. So you can have your mean, very much awesome bro Jurassic Park Tarbosaurus, and then you can have your really awesome Wheat Tarbosaurus that's very much based off prehistoric planet and very scientifically accurate, which I love as well. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to let these guys do their thing. We're just going to let them walk. We're going to let them do their social animation, and then I think we'll finish that video. Yeah, I like that they did really try to make it distinct from the Tyrannosaurus in the game. I mean like in the show. You see it's got that really big crest there and different colors and the spikes. They really did try to make something different. And you have to try at least commend them for that. Because you could have easily just reskinned Tarbosaurus and made it a little bit smaller. They tried to make it different. Whether it was successful or not, I don't know. But at least it was an attempt. And it's cool that we're getting more Jurassic Park stuff. In, like the Nothosaurus as well from the last pack. We're getting like some Camp Cretaceous stuff in there, which I always do love. Because I actually enjoyed Camp Cretaceous. I watched all the seasons. I thought it was okay. I think my personal review flopped after 4. 5 kind of saved it, but it was mainly pretty average, I think. And I like the call. I want to wait for it to do a call. I like the calls that they gave it. I think that's the best thing they did. A really interesting roar, which I'm definitely a big fan of. Just wait for it to do it. Just wait for you. Come on. Yeah, that's my opinion on Camp Cretaceous, if you're curious. Just wait for that call. Oh, he's not going to do it. There it is. But it's got like this really interesting like call that I think is so awesome.
Tarbosaurus inhabited the humid floodplains of what is now East Asia.
Oh, right.
This apex predator would have preyed upon dinosaurs and sauropods, using
But I like the calls. I think the best part of the design of what they did with the Tarbosaurus and Camp Cretaceous was the calls. I think they came out so nicely. Like the really like good calls. You gonna do it? But yeah, I think this is a. There we are. Okay, so this is a great place to end the video. So yeah, definitely a nice pack. I love like the Utahraptor and the Concavenator and the Gigantoraptor. Definitely a really awesome one. And for people that love their more Jurassic Park style stuff, you got your Tarbosaurus, and people love Camp Cretaceous. Now, the only thing we're missing is Microceratus. Now, it's the only thing we're really missing. I can't wait for Microceratus to be in the game. That's the one that we're really waiting for. Maybe we can make maybe Spino and Smilodon, but yeah, that's kind of a little bit out the gate. But now that's what we want. We want Microceratus. So Frontier, Microceratus. I want it. But yeah, really, really awesome pack. I think this has been, especially like the Utahraptors, like showing that there's definitely a love for scientific accuracy as well, and also some love for the franchise within the Tarbosaurus. So really trying to get all that Jurassic nostalgia as well. Good, healthy mix. Definitely a big fan. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified upon anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.